Your mother didn't die in the operating room last night. We killed her. Dr. Harrison's words echoed through the phone as I stood frozen in the hospital corridor, my hand gripping the edge of a water fountain. 24 hours ago, my mother had gone in for routine brain tumor surgery, low risk, straightforward, safe. Now she was in the morgue, and I was staring at a document that made my blood turn to ice. The signature, at the bottom of the Do Not Resuscitate order, wasn't mine. Someone had forged my name. Someone had authorized the hospital to let my mother die. I'm Barbara, and until yesterday morning, I believed my family was incapable of murder. The document trembled in my hands. My mother, Eleanor Chen, had been 78 and sharper than most people half her age. The tumor was benign, the surgery routine. She'd been joking with the nurses just hours before they wheeled her into the OR. "Tell Barbara I'll see her for dim sum on Sunday," she'd said. I had the text message from the charge nurse to prove it. But Sunday would never come. My mother had coded on the table, and instead of fighting to save her, the surgical team had stepped back and watched her die. Because of this paper, because of my forged signature. The hospital chaplain had found me in the waiting room at 3 in the morning, still wearing the clothes I'd thrown on when the first call came. "Your mother is gone," he'd said. And I'd nodded numbly, assuming the surgery had complications. That age had finally caught up with her, despite the doctor's optimistic predictions. It wasn't until Dr. Harrison called 6 hours later that the real horror began. "Chen, there's been a situation with your mother's advance directive. We need you to come in immediately. Bring identification and any legal documents you have regarding her healthcare proxy." I'd arrived at the hospital with my mother's living will, the healthcare proxy form she'd signed 3 years ago, naming me as her decision-maker, and my own driver's license. The administrative wing was quieter than the main hospital, carpeted and sterile. A nurse escorted me to a conference room where Dr. Harrison waited with 2 women I didn't recognize. He introduced them as hospital legal counsel. That's when I knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. Dr. Harrison had called me an hour after her death. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Miss Chen. We did everything we could, but the DNR was clear." I'd screamed at him through the phone. "What DNR? I never signed a DNR. My mother didn't want that. We talked about this." The line had gone silent for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a voice stripped of its professional calm, "You need to come to the hospital immediately. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything online. Just come." Now I stood in the administrative wing, face to face with the hospital's legal team. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and institutional fear. 3 lawyers sat across from me at a polished oak table that probably cost more than my car. The head counsel, a woman named Patricia Vance, wore a gray suit that matched her expression. She slid a plastic evidence bag across the table with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. Inside was the original DNR form, dated 3 days before my mother's surgery. The signature read, "Barbara Chen," but the handwriting was all wrong. The B was too sharp, the loop in the head too wide, the final N descended below the line, in a way mine never had. I'd been signing my name my entire adult life. I knew every curve, every habit, every muscle memory that guided my hand. "This isn't my signature," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Patricia leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "Are you absolutely certain? Because if someone forged this document, we're not talking about a clerical error, we're talking about criminal fraud. Possibly manslaughter. We need to involve the police, and that means investigations, media attention, potential lawsuits. I need you to be 100% sure before we go down that road." I pulled out my driver's license, my credit card, a check from my purse. I lined them up next to the DNR, like evidence at a crime scene. The difference was obvious, glaring. Patricia's face went pale as milk. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed a 3-digit extension. "We need security footage," she said to whoever answered. "Every camera near the admissions desk for the past week. Pull it now, and call Detective Morrison. Tell him we have a situation." Dr. Harrison sat at the far end of the table, his head in his hands. "We followed protocol," he kept saying. "The DNR was in the system. It was filed correctly. We had no reason to question it. Except I didn't sign it." My voice rose. "My mother didn't want this. We had conversations about it. Explicit conversations. She told me she wanted every possible measure taken. She was terrified of dying on an operating table, without a fight. And you let her die because someone walked in here with a forged document. If what you're saying is true, then someone committed fraud against this hospital and against your mother. Patricia's legal training was reasserting itself, her voice growing firmer. Someone deliberately circumvented our safeguards, and that person needs to be identified and prosecuted. That's when the first wave of understanding hit me. Cold and nauseating, whoever did this had access to my mother's medical records. They knew the exact date of her surgery, which had only been scheduled 2 weeks ago. They knew which forms to forge, which documents would be checked, and which would be filed without scrutiny. They knew the hospital's systems well enough to navigate them successfully, and they'd walked into this hospital, bold as brass, and signed my name to a death warrant. The security chief arrived 20 minutes later with 2 IT technicians and a laptop that looked like it could launch satellites. His name was Robert Ortiz, and he'd worked hospital security for 15 years. I pulled everything we have from the admissions desk for the week leading up to the surgery, he said, setting up the laptop on the conference table. We archive it all. 7 different camera angles. We crowded around the screen as he pulled up footage from 3 days ago. The admissions desk appeared, grainy but clear enough to make out faces and body language. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. I watched my mother shuffle up to the counter with her walker, smiling at the clerk. Even in black and white security footage, her warmth came through. She was gesturing animatedly, probably telling one of her stories. The clerk laughed. My mother patted her hand before moving away. Then 10 minutes later, at 2:57 p.m., someone else approached the desk. The figure wore a surgical mask, not unusual in a hospital, and a baseball cap pulled low over their eyes. But I recognized the jacket immediately. It was navy blue, with a distinctive orange stripe down the sleeve, and a small embroidered logo on the chest. My son-in-law Marcus had worn that exact jacket to Thanksgiving dinner. He'd been so proud of it. Custom designed from my college, he'd said. They only made 50 of these for the Alumni Association. My stomach dropped, like an elevator, with cut cables. Go back, I whispered. Play that again. The security chief rewound the footage. The person in the jacket handed papers to the clerk, signed something with broad, confident strokes, then turned and walked away with a loose, athletic gait, the exact way Marcus walked. The height was right. The build was right. But I couldn't be absolutely certain. Not yet. The mask and cap obscured too much. Can you zoom in? Patricia asked, her voice tight. Robert clicked keys, and the image pixelated as it magnified. But there on the person's left hand as they signed the document was a ring. A distinctive jade ring set in gold filigree. My mother had given Marcus that ring 2 years ago as a wedding gift when he married my daughter Lily. It had belonged to her father, my grandfather, a gift from his time working in Hong Kong in the 1960s. The jade was a specific shade of green, almost luminous, with a visible gold vein running through it. There was no other ring like it. That's my son-in-law's ring, I heard myself say. Marcus Chen, he works here. Medical billing department, 3rd floor. Dr. Harrison's head snapped up. Marcus Chen, he processed your mother's insurance, pre-authorization for the surgery. The room went silent. Robert Ortiz was already typing on his phone. I'm pulling his employee records and his building access logs right now. He looked up at me, his expression grave. Miss Chen, if an employee forged medical documents, this goes beyond criminal fraud. This is abuse of position, violation of HIPAA, conspiracy. We're talking federal charges. Patricia was making notes on a legal pad, her hand moving rapidly. We need to preserve all the evidence. Robert, I want copies of everything. All footage, all access logs, all documents Marcus Chen touched in relation to Eleanor Chen's case. And we need to contact the district attorney's office immediately. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward with a crash that made everyone jump. I need to see that jacket. I need to search his house, his office, anywhere he might have hidden it. Patricia held up a hand, her lawyer instincts taking over. Miss Chen, you need to let the police handle this. If you're right, if your son-in-law forged this document and conspired to let your mother die, that's multiple felonies. You cannot contaminate the evidence by conducting your own search. You cannot confront him. You need to step back and let law enforcement do their job. But I was already dialing Lily, my daughter, Marcus's wife, the woman who would be destroyed by this revelation. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice fuzzy with sleep. She worked night shifts as a pediatric nurse and was probably just waking up. "Mom, what's wrong? You never call this early. Where's Marcus?" I tried to keep my voice steady, neutral, but it came out strained. "He's at work." "Mom, you sound really weird. What's going on? Is this about Grandma? Did something happen with the funeral arrangements? I need you to look in your closet right now. The navy jacket with the orange stripe, the one from his college alumni association. Is it there?" A long pause. I could hear rustling as Lily got out of bed. "What? Mom, what is this about? You're scaring me." "Just look, Lily. Please. It's important." I heard footsteps through the phone, the creak of a closet door opening, the sound of hangers scraping on a rod, then silence that stretched on for what felt like hours. When Lily spoke again, her voice was small and confused. "It's not here. Marcus's jacket. It's gone. He told me he lost it last week. He was really upset about it because it was custom made. He said someone must have stolen it from his office. Lost it, or hidden it, or burned it, or buried it somewhere. No one would find it." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls of the conference room close in. "Lily, I need you to sit down. I have something to tell you about Grandma, about how she died." The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 3 days away. I spent those 72 hours in a fog of grief and rage, so thick I could barely see through it. The police had seized the security footage, launched a full investigation, opened a case file that was already inches thick with evidence. They'd interviewed Marcus twice at the station. The first time, he'd come willingly, all concern and cooperation. "I don't know anything about a forged DNR, he'd said. "According to the detective's notes, I loved Eleanor. This is devastating for all of us." The second time, after they showed him the security footage, he'd lawyered up immediately and refused to answer any questions. His attorney was a criminal defense lawyer named Thomas Rourke, known for defending white-collar criminals and making evidence disappear in technicalities. Rourke had given a statement to the press Thursday afternoon. I'd watched it on the local news, my hands clenched into fists. "The security footage is inconclusive. Plenty of people own navy jackets. Jade rings are common. The hospital is looking for a scapegoat." The reporter asked about the forged signature. Rourke smiled. "We have handwriting experts who will testify the signature is consistent with Barbara Chen's writing. Grief can cause people to forget things they've done." That suggestion sent me into a rage, so intense I threw my coffee mug at the television. Susan, who'd been with me, held me while I sobbed. "They're saying I killed my own mother." "You're being gaslighted by a murderer," Susan said firmly. "The evidence is on your side. Marcus's lies will unravel." But I wasn't so sure. Guilty people walked free all the time with money and good lawyers. And Marcus had both. His family was wealthy. Old money from shipping. That's how he and Lily afforded their suburban house, the private preschool, the luxury cars. I'd never liked how Marcus talked about money, dismissing $100 purchases as pocket change. But Lily had seemed happy, and I'd kept quiet. Now I wondered what else I'd missed. Lily wasn't speaking to me. 2 days after I told her about the footage, she called and screamed for 20 minutes. "You're trying to destroy my marriage. You've always hated Marcus. You're just bitter about the will. Some blurry footage and a common ring isn't proof. It's paranoia. You need help, Mom. I never want to see you again." She hung up. I tried calling back a dozen times. She blocked my number. I drove to her house, but the gates stayed closed. I sent emails, messages from friends' phones, even a courier letter. Nothing. My daughter had chosen her husband over me. The evidence kept coming. My brother Daniel flew in from Seattle on Friday night. He'd always been close to Marcus. They golfed together, watched football, talked investments. Marcus had helped Daniel refinance his house 3 years ago. When I picked Daniel up from the airport, he barely looked at me. He threw his bag in the back seat and climbed in without a word. We drove in silence before he finally spoke. "You really think Marcus did this?" "The evidence points to him." "Evidence? You saw a jacket and a ring. That's paranoia. You're looking for someone to blame." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Someone forged my signature. Someone let Mom die. If not Marcus, Then who? Daniel stared out the window. Maybe you signed it and forgot. You've been stressed, the will drama. Maybe you filled out the form and blocked it out. I slammed on the brakes at a red light and turned to face him. You think I killed my own mother and forgot about it? I think grief does strange things. His voice was quiet. I think Marcus is convenient for you to blame. You never thought he was good enough for Lily. The light turned green. I drove forward, jaw clenched tight. But Daniel's words burrowed into my brain like parasites. Could it be possible? Could I have signed that form in some fugue state, some moment of exhaustion or confusion, and simply not remembered? I'd been under tremendous pressure. Work had been brutal, budget cuts and layoffs and 18-hour days trying to save my department. I'd been sleeping 4 hours a night for weeks. But no. I would remember signing a DNR for my own mother. I would remember making that choice. That wasn't something you forgot, no matter how stressed you were. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Daniel snore in the guest room down the hall, my mind racing through every possibility. At 2 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs to the kitchen. I made coffee and sat at the table with every document the hospital had given me spread out in front of me. The forged DNR, the surgery consent forms, the post-operative notes, the death certificate. I read them over and over, looking for something I'd missed, some detail that would make sense of this nightmare. And then I saw it, a small notation at the bottom of the DNR, in the section marked witness. The witness signature was illegible, just a scrawl of loops and lines, but below it was a printed name, handwritten in block capitals, D. Chen. Du Chen, Daniel Chen. My brother. The room tilted. My hands went numb. I stared at those 7 letters until they blurred and doubled. Daniel had witnessed the forged signature. Daniel had been at the hospital 3 days before Mom's surgery. But he'd told me he couldn't fly out until after the operation because of a work conference in Vancouver. I'll come as soon as I can, he'd said, when I called to tell him about the scheduled surgery, but I can't get away until Thursday at the earliest. You'll have to handle the pre-op stuff without me, he'd lied. He'd been here. He'd been at that admissions desk when Marcus, someone else, forged my name, and he'd signed as a witness to the forgery. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone as I called Robert Ortiz, the security chief. It was 2 in the morning, but he answered on the 3rd ring, his voice alert. Miss Chen? What's wrong? The witness signature on the DNR. My voice came out strangled. D. Chen. That's my brother, Daniel. Can you check the footage again? Was he there? Was my brother at the hospital when the DNR was filed? A long pause. I heard rustling, the click of a laptop opening. Hold on. Give me a minute to pull up the files. The sound of typing filled the line, rapid and urgent. Then a sharp intake of breath. There's a second person in the footage. Someone we missed initially because we were focused on the individual in the jacket. But yes, there's a man standing back from the desk, near the vending machines. He's watching. Let me enhance this. I waited in agonizing silence, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The coffee maker burbled in the background, oblivious to the world falling apart around it. Miss Chen. Robert's voice was grim. The second man in the footage, he's in his 60s, I'd estimate. He's not trying to hide like the person in the jacket. He's just observing. And then after the jacket leaves, he approaches the desk. The clerk hands him something. He signs it. I can see his face partially. Let me run this through facial recognition. Give me an hour. Now. The word came out as a command. Do it now. I need to know. All right. Stay on the line. I sat in the dark kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Robert's breathing and the soft clicks of his keyboard. 10 minutes passed. Then, it's him. Daniel Chen. Facial recognition confirms it with 94% certainty. He signed as the witness to that forged DNR. The phone slipped from my hand. I stared at the guest room door where my brother slept and felt something inside me shatter into pieces, so small I'd never be able to put them back together. I sat in the dark, waiting. My brother Daniel, who'd always been the responsible one, the one Mom trusted with her financial power of attorney. Daniel, who'd been furious when Mom changed her will. That's $300,000 you're taking from me, he'd said. From my retirement. But he'd stopped speaking to her. For 3 months before her surgery, he hadn't called her once. I walked to the guest room and watched him snore, peaceful and oblivious. My little brother, who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who'd cried at our father's funeral, and slept in my guest room for a week because he couldn't bear to be alone, who had apparently conspired to murder our mother for money. I didn't wake him. I went back to my room, packed a bag, and drove to a hotel. I couldn't be under the same roof as him. The funeral was at noon on Saturday. I arrived early and sat in the front pew, staring at my mother's closed casket. The funeral home had done their best, but there was no open casket viewing. The autopsy had been too invasive. I'd insisted on the autopsy. The police had needed it for their investigation. The results had come back yesterday. Cause of death was cardiac arrest during surgery, compounded by the medical team's failure to resuscitate. If they'd tried, she might have survived. The tumor had been successfully removed. She died for nothing. People began to file in. Cousins, friends, neighbors. Lily arrived with Marcus and their son. She didn't look at me. They sat 3 rows back. Daniel arrived last, his face drawn and gray. He slid into the pew next to me. "Barbara, we need to talk." "Not here," I whispered. "Yes, here. Before this starts, you need to know. I know you witnessed the forged DNR." My voice was flat. "I saw the security footage. The police have it too." Daniel's face crumpled. I didn't know what I was signing. Marcus told me it was a standard pre-op form, that Mom had requested it but forgotten to sign. He said you were too stressed to come to the hospital, that you'd asked him to handle the paperwork. I believed him. I turned to look at him. "You didn't think to call me, to verify?" He stopped. "I should have. God, Barbara, I should have." But Marcus showed me text messages that looked like they were from you, saying you'd handle everything later, that Mom was being difficult about the surgery. I thought I was helping. Fake messages. I know that now. Daniel's hands were shaking. I confronted him yesterday. After you called the security chief, I went to his house and told him I knew what he'd done. He denied everything at first. Then he said, Mom deserved it, that she was a selfish old woman who was ruining Lily's future, that the house should go to Lily and her son, not to you. He said he was protecting his family. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Where is he now? Here. Daniel nodded toward the back of the room. With Lily. He doesn't know I'm going to testify against him. I wanted to tell you first. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The minister began the service. I barely heard the prayers, the hymns, the eulogy. All I could think about was Marcus sitting 3 rows behind me, calm and composed, holding his son's hand. A man who'd forged documents, manipulated his wife's uncle, and killed an elderly woman for inheritance money, and he'd almost gotten away with it. After the burial, as people gathered for the reception, I approached Marcus. Lily saw me coming and stepped between us. "Don't, Mom. Just don't." "Your husband forged my signature," I said quietly. "He convinced Daniel to witness it. He let Grandma die." Lily's face was pale. "You're insane. You've been saying this for days, but you have no proof." "I have the security footage. I have Daniel's confession, and I have this." I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse. It was a printout of text messages, the ones Marcus had shown Daniel. But I'd had them analyzed by a forensic digital expert. The timestamps were off. The metadata showed they'd been created using a spoofing app. He faked messages from me to trick Daniel. He planned this, Lily, for months. Marcus's expression didn't change. "You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. The police are waiting outside." I kept my voice steady. "They have a warrant for your arrest. Fraud, forgery, and negligent homicide. They wanted to wait until after the funeral, out of respect for my mother, but I told them to come now. I told them you don't deserve respect." Lily turned to look at Marcus. "Tell her it's not true. Tell her, Marcus." But Marcus didn't speak. He just stared at me, his jaw tight. And in that silence, Lily understood. I watched her face change, watched the realization break over her like a wave. Oh my God, you did it." Marcus grabbed her arm. "Lily, listen to me." She wrenched away from him. "You killed my grandmother. For money. For the house. For us." Marcus's voice rose. "For our son. That house was supposed to be yours. Your mother was going to take it all. I was protecting our future." The room had gone silent. Everyone was staring, and then the police walked in. 2 detectives, both of whom I'd spent the past 3 days working with. They approached Marcus with handcuffs. "Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for fraud and conspiracy to commit negligent homicide." Lily was crying, her son clutching her leg in confusion. Marcus didn't resist. He let them cuff him, his face blank. As they led him past me, he stopped. "She was going to live another 10 years, Barbara. 10 years of watching Lily get nothing while you got everything." I did what had to be done. I slapped him. My palm connected with his cheek so hard the sound echoed through the funeral home. "My mother was worth more than a house, and you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing you killed a woman who loved you." They took him away. Lily collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Daniel stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. The funeral guests were murmuring, shocked, but I felt nothing, just a vast, empty coldness where my grief should have been. The trial took 8 months. Marcus pleaded not guilty, claimed he'd been trying to honor what he believed were my mother's wishes, that the DNR was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature, the security footage, the fake text messages, Daniel's testimony. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. He got 12 years. The judge called it a calculated act of greed disguised as family loyalty. Lily divorced him before the sentencing. She moved back in with me, into my mother's house, the house Marcus had killed for. We don't talk about him. We don't say his name. Sometimes, late at night, I pull out the DNR document, the forged signature. I trace the loops and curves, the places where Marcus tried to mimic my handwriting and failed, and I think about how a single piece of paper, a single lie, can end a life. My mother died believing her family loved her. She never knew what Marcus had planned. Maybe that's a mercy, or maybe it's just another cruelty in a long list of cruelties. I kept my mother's house. I didn't sell it. Lily and her son live in the West Wing, and I live in the East. On Sundays, we make dim sum together, and I tell my grandson stories about his great-grandmother, stories about her strength, her humor, her grace. I don't tell him how she died. He doesn't need to know that yet. Maybe someday. For now, I just make sure he knows she was loved, and that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or price tags or forged signatures. It just comes, simple and true, the way it should have been all along.